Okay, now let's look at O of n squared. So I'm going to bring up some code from our last video where we had one for loop after another. I'm going to take this and I'm going to change it to be one for loop inside of the other like this. We'll get a very different result when we have a loop inside of a loop. Okay, so now let's go over to VS Code and take a loop at this and run this. Okay, so there is our function there with our for loop inside of our for loop. And then we're going to call that function with the number 10, and I'm going to run that. Okay, so you can see down here we have 9, 9 as our last output. And if we scroll to the top here, we have 0, 0. So essentially from 0, 0 to 99. So we had 100 items print out. Okay, so now let's flip back over. So when we printed this to the screen, we got n times n items printing out, or n squared, and that's where we get our O of n squared. So instead of doing this as two for loops, one after the other, let's look at what happens when we take this one level deeper. And then we're also going to print out the k from this for loop. Now we have a for loop within a for loop within a for loop. Let's take a look at this in VS Code. Okay, so there is our updated function there with the 3 for loops. Once again, we're going to call this with the number 10. And I'll run this. This time I'll do it with the right click and say run code. And then you can see here at the very bottom, there is 999. If we scroll all the way up to the top here, it starts at 0, 0, 0. So essentially 0 to 999. So let's flip back over here. This ran n times n times n times, or n cubed. And you might think that we write this as O of n cubed, but as you may have guessed, we're going to simplify this, and we're going to call this O of n squared. So it doesn't matter if it's O to the third, fourth, 10th, we're going to simplify it as O of n squared. So let's take a look at this on the graph. So you can see that the line for O of n squared is much steeper than O of n. And this means it's a lot less efficient from a time complexity standpoint. And that is O of n squared.